I'm John Geaver for MedPage Today in Honolulu for the American Psychiatric Association annual meeting. The DSM-5 process is heading for a conclusion in just 2 years. And at the same time, the latest revision to the International Diagnostic Code System, the ICD-11, is scheduled for conclusion in just 3 years. I talked with Dr. Darrell Regier, the APA's research director, about how these processes interrelate and the challenges in working and thinking globally and cross-culturally.
I was hired actually at the APA to go from the NIMH to go to direct research at the American Psychiatric Association to help coordinate the development of a DSM-5. And so we pulled in the WHO and the World Psychiatric Association and started working with the National Institute of Mental Health on a series of white papers that took a couple of years, and we published this research agenda for DSM-5, but it was also for ICD-11. And then after completed that, we applied for a grant to the National Institute of Mental Health and had a grant for 5 years to convene 13 conferences to look at the state-of-the-art of research around the world with the WHO. And Norman Sartorius, who had been director of the ICD-10 and had then retired from the WHO, was appointed by Benedetto Saracino, who was then the mental health director of the WHO, to work with us. And we then brought together over 400 participants in 13 conferences, and more than 50% of these were international. So we had several international settings. Some of the conferences were held in Beijing, in Mexico City, in Geneva, in London, in order to really get an international flavor to what we were trying to accomplish, which is really to get international consensus on the research base for modifying our diagnostic criteria.
Dr. Regier said about 30% of the DSM-5 workgroup members are from other countries, and that there are frequent meetings to ensure that the DSM-5 is consistent with the ICD-11 on their parallel development tracks.
It really is a harmonization effort from the beginning. We know that it's important to have the same basic classification for mental disorders around the world, the same as it is for cancer or heart disease or infectious diseases. I mean, if there are different diagnoses for SARS in China than there are in the US, it'd be terrible. And it's the same with mental disorders.
But cultural differences make this a hard task sometimes.
Michael Phillips, who is an epidemiologist in China, mentioned that perhaps as many as 70% of Chinese in rural areas don't even know what the word depression means. And it's very unlikely, as I was talking with a Korean colleague here, dealing with the issue of how do you get a culturally equivalent, description of the physiological state of major depression in an Asian country compared with the way in which, say, a Western or American would describe sadness, loss of interest, and fatigue, and loss of appetite, loss of sleep. On the somatic symptoms, they're going to be right with you. And in the loss of interest. But in the major mood symptom, it will probably not even be expressed. And so you have to have a way of knowing how you can actually have a cultural equivalent in that. And in fact, Michael Phillips worked very closely using the SCID interview that he translated into Chinese and made culturally equivalent to how you would do depression and the whole range of other disorders, and found prevalence rates that were roughly equal to what we have in the US. When you go to the trouble and you understand the culture and you understand the language and the idiom of expression, that's the kind of challenge that you have to have when you're dealing with symptomatic expression as opposed to biological markers.
In Honolulu, I'm John Geaver, MedPage Today.